Happy Thursday, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of Unplugged with Pam, Breakfast Club edition, where we don't just talk about growth, we walk in it. As every beautiful Thursday morning, it is my honor, pleasure, and privilege to go live with y'all. Last week, if you were not here, we spoke about the drift, right? We said, don't drift away. And as always, if you have missed an episode and you want to stay connected, we are on all streaming platforms from Spotify to Apple to Amazon, Buzzsprout, you name it, YouTube, of course. And today I wanted to talk about something because, I always talk to you guys about the conversations that I really have with myself, the conversations that kind of not only struck a nerve, but I had an aha moment. One of those moments that you're just like, it's an epiphany. Really is like God be talking to you when you be talking to other people. Yeah, that happens. But it was about the cost of avoidance. And if you're taking notes, because note takers are history makers, and I always tell you guys, make sure that whether you are listening to me talk on an episode, whether you are listening to me interview someone, just know that you're going to get value as always. So take notes and take them as if one day you had to teach it. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, the cost of avoidance, because every single one of us has done it. And some of us, we're really being honest, doing it right now. Maybe it is avoiding the conversation. Maybe it is avoiding the decision. Maybe it's avoiding opening the email. Maybe it's avoiding looking at the numbers. Maybe it's avoiding making the phone call, right? Maybe it's avoiding setting the boundary. Maybe it's avoidance in asking the question. Maybe it's avoiding just admitting something is wrong, avoiding saying, I was wrong. Sometimes taking accountability for our own actions just seems tough, especially when we're so quick to point that finger, right? Not realizing that three of those fingers are pointing back at us. Sometimes it's, I'm very, very guilty. And if my friends are hearing this, they'll be like, that's right. It's avoiding asking for help. Yes, sometimes it's hard for strong, especially the strong, hyper independent women to ask for help. Sometimes it's avoiding dealing with something because we know dealing with what is going on is actually going to make us uncomfortable. And avoidance, let's be real, it can actually feel good temporarily, because if you don't open the email, if I don't have to deal with what's really going on inside, if I don't got to look at the bank account, I don't got to deal with the number, I don't have to have the conversation, I don't have to experience discomfort, right? And man, if I don't got to make the decision, I don't have to risk making the wrong one, because really that's how we're wired, right? Our brains are meant to protect us, and sometimes it's hard for us to differentiate safety from freedom, and safety is not always freedom. And here's the problem: when we really think about avoidance, it doesn't really eliminate the cost. Most of the time it actually does the opposite, it increases it. And here's one of the biggest things that I want you to remember today: avoidance has interest. And you're like, wait, are you talking banking right now? No. Because let me just kind of explain that a little bit. Just like, when I worked in finance, and I still talk when I am coaching or consulting, whether it's companies or entrepreneurs or just people, right? I talk about finances because what you avoid, right, eventually erupts. However, just like financial debt can accumulate interest, the things that we refuse to deal with can accumulate emotional interest. They can accumulate relational interest, financial interest, professional interest, spiritual interest. So the question today isn't simply, what are you avoiding? The real deeper question, if I may ask, is, what is the avoidance costing you? Think about that for a second. And I want to make something very clear, as always, before I even go any further. I'm not telling you to become impulsive, right? And I Definitely, I'm that person that's just like, success will make decisions fast, change your mind slow. Success will follow character, confidence, and strength, never weakness. Yes, those are really true things. Yes. However, is a difference between Godfidence or confidence and being intentional to actually being impulsive. So I'm not saying confront everybody about everything, right? That's not what I'm saying either, because there are times that wisdom says, wait. Wisdom says, pray. Wisdom says, get more information. Wisdom says, cool down, surrender it, right? Surrender it, seek counsel, because in the multitude of wise counsel, there's safety. Also, just think sometimes, discern. But there is a difference between discernment and avoidance. And I've had to learn that myself. And deep down, most of us know when we're doing one, excuse me, versus the other, because sometimes that one thing that's exhausting you isn't even everything you're doing. And as I'm taking inventory on my own life and holding my own self accountable, and I was talking to my therapist last week about this, and I said, sometimes it's the thing exhausting you, it's what you keep refusing to deal with. So let's talk about that. Number one, y'all hear me say this. Hashtag that, right? Avoidance has entrance. So when I say avoidance has interest, a problem that can easily cost you $100 today can really cost you $1,000 down the line. And I actually had that happen to me not too long ago with my car. I'm just a girl, y'all. Don't judge me, okay? Who's got too much, right? But it's the reality, right? So I could have really, it was a little, my light went on and I'm just like, oh, I don't know, whatever. It's fine. It's just the light that's on. It's nothing. Well, it went from being a $50 problem to almost a $500 problem because I neglected it for so long. I just avoided taking it into the shop. I avoided getting the diagnostic. I avoided doing the things that I knew that I needed to do. So the problem that can cost you $100 today sometimes can cost you $1,000 tomorrow. A conversation that would have been uncomfortable for 15 minutes can become 6 months of resentment. It can be a client issue or something of, it could have been a personnel issue, right? That you could have corrected immediately if we're really thinking about it. But now that just became a damaged relationship. And a problem with a teammate or an employee or a mentee that you do not address, that you're not having that conversation with, eventually becomes a problem with your entire culture in your company, in your organization, in your community. And I will tell you, you guys know I curate events and retreats locally and abroad. By the way, our third annual creators conference, yes, I am the shameless plug. That's why I'm Pam the plug, okay? Our third annual creators conference is taking place this fall in November, and I'm so excited. Like I am each and every single year. It is going to be one for the books. However, I also know that there's been times that I haven't addressed things with the team because I'm like, oh my goodness, I want them to know how appreciated they are. But man, if I don't have these tough conversations, we can't grow, because you have to have boundaries. You have to have and be able to manage those expectations accordingly. But it's like, imagine a bill that you refuse to open. Does it disappear? No. A deadline that you refuse to acknowledge. Does it stop approaching? No. I remember time and time again, I was like as persistent as I am, I was the master procrastinator. Like, you couldn't tell me nothing. I'm going to get an A on that paper. 20-page paper, a breeze. Okay, your girl was, it's fine. Everything's kosher. And I became so accustomed to it that I was shocking my nervous system. So when I actually took the time and I had a paper due in a month or 3 weeks out, and I'm actually taking the time to do more research and early go through it. You know, back in the day, we used to have like MLA, APA, all these things. So if the times that I actually took my time and I wasn't like delaying or putting it off, it was like my nervous system was like, wait, this is not what we're accustomed to. And the reality is that an uncomfortable truth, a deadline doesn't, just like a deadline doesn't disappear, an uncomfortable truth doesn't become less truth because you haven't said it out loud. You feel how you feel. Truth is the truth. So it's one of those things when I say avoidance has interest, it's just like financial interest. If I owe something and I don't pay it, the debt does not just disappear. It is politely waiting for me and it grows, right? Compounded interest. And it's politely waiting for me, like, hello, girl. All right, good morning. Hits me again. Life works exactly the same. There's emotional interest. And you can go out of you could go out of your way, or you could go about your day like nothing happens. But the issue is really just sitting in the back of your mind. So now that's mental interest. And every time that person's name appears on your phone, your stomach just turns. That's relational interest. Conversation, it hasn't happened, but the resentment is just accumulating. And man, I've been there, right? Over and over and over again. There's also professional interest, right? So you haven't made the decision, but the opportunity is slowly disappearing. So when I say, let me ask you something, I had to ask myself this. What are you currently paying interest because you haven't dealt with the principle? What are you currently paying interest on because you have not dealt with the principle? Maybe that is your finances. Maybe that is a relationship. Maybe that is a contract. Maybe that is a client, a mentee, a teammate. Maybe that is your business. Maybe it is your career. Maybe that's an apology. Maybe that's a decision. Maybe that's something that you've been saying for 6 months. Like, I know I need to deal with that. I need to deal with that. Well, what is it? Because when we realize the things that we're actually delaying is dealing with something and later on realizing, like, man, if I just would have addressed this earlier, I could have saved myself so much stress. I could have saved myself so much money. I could have saved myself so much emotional energy. And for me, avoiding my car, that was like all three in one, right? I could have avoided more money. I could have avoided the stress mentally. I could have avoided the emotional things, right? Um, yeah. So it's coming back to knowing, like, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's relational, whether it's a contract, whether it's a partnership, whether it's finances, whether it's your career, whether it's just your health, avoidance has interest. Number two, avoidance creates a false peace. I hear people all the time, because I'm people, right? I'm just protecting my peace. But really, it's my defense mechanism too. Because some things, now, don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm all for protecting your peace. And if you know, you know. However, I think it's important that you are careful. I think it's important that you're careful because sometimes we're calling something peace when it's really avoidance. And peace and avoidance are not the same thing. Sometimes real peace, and I'm talking about that real peace, it requires an uncomfortable conversation. Sometimes real peace requires a boundary. Yes, the B word that some of y'all just cringe when you hear, but it's true. I was just talking about that with my brother yesterday. I'm like, listen, I don't care who it is. Like, we got boundaries over here. Like, you're gonna learn how to treat me. And if you don't get a response, that's a response. And we'll talk about that in a second. Sometimes real peace requires you just saying no. Just saying no. Sometimes real peace requires you just starting a conversation with, I need to tell you how this made me feel. Sometimes real peace requires you saying, I owe you an apology. sometimes real peace requires something you don't necessarily want to hear. And it's not saying that, because there's a huge difference, right? There's a huge difference between when somebody wants to, let it out on you and be like, you made me feel like this, like this, like this, like this. And it's always coming back to you always know when people are actually doing the work, right? You guys know I talk about Byron Katie, the 4 questions method all the time. Is it true? Right? Is it absolutely true? How do I feel with that thought? And who would I be without it? Right? Because sometimes we think like, oh, it is true, but it's absolutely true. And a lot of times people are living these lives of hell, let's just be honest and call a spade, because they're creating false narrative in their story. They're creating a false story and a false narrative in their mindset. So therefore, again, we spoke about this a few weeks ago, change your BS, change your belief system, right? So you're creating this false narrative in your mindset. So I don't ever mind having a conversation and it's like, and I'm quick to, if I know that I was wrong, because I'm human, right? And I'm not perfect from it. Only one that was perfect died on the cross for us thousands of years ago. Okay. And by the name of Jesus. But it's one of those things that I'm also very careful because I know who I am and I know whose I am. And I'm not going to also let anybody degrade me because you're in your feelings. And sometimes you're reflecting, you're deflecting from you taking ownership and accountability for what that is. It could have been a friendship. It could have been a business. It could have been a career. It could have been whatever it is. And the reality is that it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. So for anything to work, I believe God has to be in the center, number one, but it requires effort on both parties. So sometimes real peace, yes, it requires you hearing something you don't want to hear. And avoidance will tell you, if I don't address it, at least we're not fighting. But no conflict doesn't automatically mean peace, right? You can have a quiet marriage and no intimacy. You can have a quiet workplace where everybody is afraid to tell the truth. I remember it was like walking on pins and needles sometimes in our banking meetings on Monday mornings because everybody was on edge and had a lot to say, but nobody was saying anything because we couldn't get the district manager mad, right? And sometimes you have a disagreement just because everyone is checked out. Sometimes silence isn't really peace. And sometimes it's tension, just wearing a quiet outfit. So maybe it's you that needs to hear this. Maybe it's me that needs to hear this again. Peace and avoidance are not the same thing. Sometimes the road to peace goes directly through the uncomfortability, that the uncomfortable thing that you've been avoiding. Sometimes the road to peace goes directly through the uncomfortable thing that we have been avoiding. So it's so many stories that I could tell y'all over and over about things that I avoided and dreading having a conversation. And I remember just even the anxiety behind it, like, oh my goodness, I can't even, oh, my belly is a button. It's like, you feel it, right? Like your whole body just feels the anxiety and the tension. And then what's worse is not only are you feeling all the anxiety, I remember also just the story that I was creating in my head. And then what happened? Finally had the conversation. And no, it wasn't perfect, but at least there was clarity. There wasn't any assumptions. And a lot of times it's important for us to have those conversations because whether we realize it or not, if it's taking up mental space and mental energy, it's something that you've probably been avoiding that you need to confront. And, I remember when my therapist asked me this is like, have you spent 3 weeks, hear me closely, have you spent 3 weeks thinking about a 20-minute conversation? I was like, because the truth is, most of us have. Most of us have in one way, point, shape, or form. And some of us believe, well, if I don't say anything, it's better. Which brings me into the next point. Silence is still communication. Yes, right? And some of us believe that if I don't say anything, eventually it's gonna get better. Excuse me. I sip my cafecito with y'all this morning. But when we think about silence is still communication, so why do I say that? Well, if you lead people and somebody consistently violates expectations all the time, and you say absolutely nothing, you've actually communicated something. Think about that for a second. They violate over. And you say absolutely nothing. And sometimes if somebody treats you in a way that hurts you and you never address it, they may assume it's acceptable. And I've been guilty of that myself, right? Because I'm just like, you know what, out of sight, out of mind, it is what it is, and just whatever. I don't really care about it. That's just who that person is. But man, it bothered me. It hurt my feelings. And it took me so long to be able to actually address it, because if you resent someone for failing to meet an expectation you never communicated, they may not even know what the expectation was in the first place. So they assume it was acceptable because you didn't say anything. And here's what I learned. This may shock you. Okay? This may shock you a little bit. People aren't mind readers. They're not. We're just not. Your kids aren't mind readers. Your spouses aren't mind readers. Your team are not mind readers. Your siblings are not mind readers. Your friends aren't. Your business partners aren't. Your employee aren't. Your church isn't mind readers. Your pastors isn't mind readers. Sometimes we're angry at people for failing tests they didn't even know they were taking. You ever had that? Because I know I have, right? You're like, I'm gonna test them. And they failed. Just like they passed with flying colors, child, they failed with flying colors. Because they didn't even know they were taking a test. Sometimes we're angry for people that are failing tests that didn't even know they were taking. And you're letting that consume you. Is that healthy? No, absolutely not. Let me tell you what I've learned. In anything, and how you do anything is truly how you do everything. Leadership requires clarity for you to lead your ship. Relationships require clarity. Business, it requires clarity. Whether it's your business partner, business team, and clarity requires communication. I've done coaching for entrepreneurs, adults, children, on just basic level of communication. Because somewhere, somebody along the line told you this is how you communicate, this is how you don't communicate. So now everybody has this belief system of what communication actually entails. And the reality is that if somebody on your team isn't performing for months and you're frustrated, and everybody else knows you're frustrated, but that teammate, but that business partner, and you talk about them to other people, but you actually haven't sat down with them and said, hey, here's the expectation. Here is where we're falling short. And because it's not just here's where you're falling short, or here's where I feel that we're falling short, here's where I feel that we could do better, and here's what actually needs to improve. Here's when you actually have that, one day, if you don't say that, one day what's going to happen eventually is you'll just explode. And it'll just come out in the wrong way. Your emotions will lead the conversations instead of your logic, instead of reasoning. And that's why you hear all the time when emotions are high, intelligence isn't. And some people, because it's happened, will be like, well, why didn't you tell me? Is that a personnel issue? Is that a teammate issue? Is that a business partner issue? No. That becomes a leadership issue. That becomes a leadership issue. So people cannot meet expectations that we have not clearly communicated. So there have been so many times, and I can go on and on and on about unclear communication or an assumption that created a bigger problem than it was actually necessary. And everything changed about it when we got clear. The operating systems changed. We were able to identify where the bottlenecks were. We were able to smooth out the process. There were so many things, and I can go on and on and on. And we also, because we had those conversations, the camaraderie in our team, the camaraderie in our organization was like, oh, it's a safe space. I can communicate how I'm feeling without it being an issue. Oh, if I feel like something's getting better, like we're all captains here, we're all playing a position, we're all playing a key role. My opinion matters, how I feel matters. So immediately that shifted the culture. Immediately, because the culture was shifted, but it started with the conversations that was uncomfortable, the mindset shifted, the culture shifted, the results shifted, because now the process was seamless. Now there was no room for error because certain things that were uncomfortable to address finally got addressed. So that's what happens when everybody finally gets clear. Because remember, silence is still communication. And if y'all are getting value from this type of V, and always make sure you are sharing our episodes and just blessing somebody else. Point number 4. We're almost halfway through, y'all. Indecision is still a decision. When you decide, you cut off from, right? You kill all other options. This one makes us all uncomfortable. It's like I'm walking in pins and needles. Sometimes it's, I haven't decided yet. That's okay. I get it. That's more than understandable. But time, it didn't stop because you didn't decide. The reality is that life is still moving. Money is still moving. Opportunities are still moving. If you don't seize the opportunity, it will just go to the next person actually ready. And that's cool. I see it happen all the time in business. Deadlines, they're still moving. Sometimes refusing to make the decision means that you're choosing the same current situation by default. Again, sometimes refusing to make the decision, it means that you're choosing the same situation by default. Not choosing is still choosing. You don't decide whether you're leaving the job or stay another year. So because you don't decide, you stay another year. You don't decide whether to restructure the business or the organization, so the dysfunction remains. You don't decide where to apply the things that need to be done. So now the deadline actually passes, and you don't decide whether to actually ask so somebody else gets the opportunity. You don't decide whether to take the next step in your business or your life so somebody else gets the opportunity. You don't decide whether the relationship needs a boundary and some patterns continues. Again, not choosing is still choosing. Delay does not freeze consequences. There's absolutely a place for patience. There's a place for wisdom. There's a place for discernment. But there is such a thing as analysis paralysis. And at some point, you have to decide. You guys know I live a very faith-based life, and God has completely transformed my soul. Thank you, Lord. One of my favorite verses in James 1:5, it says, if you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all. If you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all. I love this because God does not tell us pretend. like you got all the answers and you got it all figured out and you got this girl, you got this boy. No, no, no. Very specific. Very, very specific. Ask him for wisdom. Pray. Get counsel. Get information. Do your homework. Do the research. Do all the things. Cross the T's, dot the I's. But then take action. Move. Move. Man, I'll tell y'all, and you're probably brand new here. When I had to leave corporate America, and when I'm saying like had to leave, it's not like, oh, I had to leave. Some of you are like, well, you didn't have to leave. You chose entrepreneurship. When you see something is taking a toll on your mental health, and you believe enough in the vehicle, and you've saved up enough, and you're like, you know what? Whatever it is. And I remember when I was leaving it, and I'm not going to bore you with the details of the entire story, but there was a moment that I realized one thing. If I keep analyzing this forever, if I keep overanalyzing it forever, I'm not going to make a decision. And what indecision cost me before I left was mental fatigue. What indecision cost me was lack of performance because I simply just did not care anymore to do the job. I was over it. My loan production was going down. My deposits like I had hit my goal for the first quarter, and then I was just like, yeah, I'm good. I don't feel like it. I already hit goals in first quarter for the whole year. Like I'm over it. I was over it. So making a decision actually changed everything because, again, not choosing was still choosing. So when I made that decision, I remember like yesterday, I was with one of my friends and I was like, come, we got to go pull up to my mom first. And I'm going to tell her, and I don't know, we're going to see what she says. And I was like, Mommy, I left the bank today. And she's like, what you mean you left the bank? Like you left work early? Okay. I see you're in regular clothes. You're not in a suit today. It's fine. I was like, no, I left the bank. I'm going to pursue entrepreneurship full time. You know, my residual income is growing. I have a vision for what it looks like. And I know you're already supportive of that, but I know I didn't tell you, but I'm telling you now, like I left corporate America. I put in my 2 weeks notice today. And I remember her face went from, I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised because she knows who her daughter was. And she knew how gung-ho I was about the opportunity. And my mom was also my business partner. So she was excited because she's like, if she got free time, then I can leverage that time, right? But I remember just her telling me, like, I'm proud of you. Whatever you put your mind to, I know that you can do, and you have my full support. And it was like a weight just got off my, like, it was harder for me to tell my mother because who was an attorney that had sacrificed her whole entire identity for us to come to this country. And I'm like, oh, Mom, I'm leaving a 6-figure job, 6-figure career. It was so much more nerve-wracking for me to tell her because I care about her perception of me. That's my number one, versus me even telling my boss. So that lack of decision-making in the time, and granted, I finally did it, and whoo, thank you, Lord, because here we are, you know, an entrepreneurship, a total of 13 years. It's been 11 years since I left the corporate workforce. I've never clocked into a 9 to 5 in the last 11 years. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. It's not for the faint. It's not for the weak. I tell you, because a lot of people say they want something until they actually have to go do it. A lot of people are comfortable, and that's okay because each their own. Pero, just saying, that lack of indecision and that decision cost me. It cost me peace. It cost me even taking the business to the next level. And immediately I left. Within 6 months, I replaced my 6-figure income that I was making at the bank, and it was a total of 18 months. Don't think I made six figures in 6 months, guys. Relax. But it was an aha moment for me because I was like, girl, You was over here not deciding to do that for so long, scared for what? Like, God provides. Wherever God provides. So it was so important because it was such a clear reminder, not choosing is still choosing. Point number 5. You can't address what you refuse to name. You guys know I'm very big on this. You can't address what you refuse to name. Sometimes avoidance is hiding behind vague language. It can be like, my business is weird right now. Okay, somebody told me that recently, and I said, okay, well, tell me, what does that mean? My relationship isn't right. Well, what isn't right? Like, let's dig deep. Let's talk specifics. I'm stressed about what? Money is tight. Why? I'm going to ask the question, because if you don't ask the question, you can't really dig deep and really get the answers and get the peace and the clarity that it is that you're looking for. My team isn't working. Well, where exactly is the breakdown? When exactly did that happen and where? Right? The more specific that you actually become, the more powerful you become. You cannot solve a problem that you're committed to describing vaguely. You cannot solve a problem that you're committed to describing vaguely. There is no resolution. There is no resolve to it. Maybe the truth is the partnership isn't working. Maybe the truth is I overspent. Maybe the truth is I made the wrong hire. Maybe the truth is my pricing is wrong. Maybe the truth is I didn't follow up. Maybe the truth is I've been hurt. Maybe the truth is I need help. Maybe the truth is I've been avoiding accountability. Maybe the truth is I owe somebody an apology. Maybe the truth is you owe yourself an apology. Maybe the truth is you didn't get up to go work out. Maybe the truth is you keep making these trade-offs with your future, these trade-offs with your purpose for a temporary pleasure, temporary gain, right? So the decisions that you have or have not made is why you are exactly where you're at today. And sometimes, and this is when somebody's like, well, I don't understand this. Sometimes saying the actual thing is scary, because once we name it, let's be real, it gets real, right? Once we name it, it's like, oh, stop. I can't actually point the finger at somebody else. Now I have to actually be held accountable for my actions. Now it's not only about how I feel, but now that that person actually named how they feel too, now I have to take responsibility for what I caused in this as well. So when you can actually address it, specific truth creates specific action. So when you're saying some things like, well, business is bad or business is slow, I don't know what to fix. Well, if I say my lead generation is strong, but my follow-up is inconsistent, now we actually have something to solve, don't you think? Because I say also things like, my finances are a mess, that feels overwhelming, right? Versus, man, I haven't looked at my spending in 3 months. Now we have an action that we could take. And there's been so many times, and I'll tell you about the finances one, because the number one demand in the world is demand to make more money. So whenever I am dealing with anybody, whether it's a life or business, and we go over these things, because whatever you don't master masters you. Whatever you don't master, it masters you. So I have real conversations. I'm like, okay, well, where is your money going to right now? Like, and they'll tell me this. And I'm like, okay, let me get your bank statement. And I want the bank statement of the account that you use. Because wherever your money goes, that's where your heart is at. So I want to make you a master of your money. I don't want money to master you. Money is supposed to be your slave. So let's get down to actually saying, okay, well, where is this going? Oh, well, maybe you could make coffee at home instead of spending Starbucks $10 to $12 a day. Oh, it's because I had one somebody recently was like, no, Pam, it's like I'm generous and I wanna bring coffee in for one of my coworkers. That's my girl. I said, cool, make that coffee at home. You got a thermos at home, don't you? Yes, I do. Okay. Well, here now we're eliminating because when I added it up, it was over $200 in a month. Sometimes it was more than $12 a day. Sometimes it was 20. Sometimes it was 2 Starbucks runs. Okay. Then I'm looking at the account. I'm like, oh, Chick-fil-A here, La Granja here, right? And if you don't know what La Granja is, it's like a rotisserie chicken, like a Pollo Tropical, whatever fast food chain. But I'm looking at all of the eating outs, and we're going line by line by line by line by line. To the point that you're like, oh snap, I'm spending over $500 a month in just eating out, lunch, and that's on a good month. Some months it was over 1,000. So is it a money issue or is it a mastering it issue? So immediately we're like, you thought you had one problem, but we actually discovered the real problem. And sometimes maybe you're looking at your business or your organization and you're like, maybe it looked like marketing. A lot of times it looks like marketing and it's really the follow-up, right? Maybe sometimes people are like, I just need more people. I need more personnel. And that was me recently. It was like, I need more staff. Because sometimes maybe it looks like staffing, but really it's just communication to the team that you currently have and just delegating what it is that drains you. Maybe sometimes it looked like the money, but it was really the pricing or it was the savings. So when did naming the real issue change everything? Again, asking yourself that, or has it not? Because if you cannot solve a problem, you are committed to describing vaguely. I'll just leave that right there. Number 6, so we can wrap this up. Hard conversations are a part of leadership. Whew. That one was tough for me, I'm gonna tell y'all, because it has in business and communication, and man, this is why bonus, right? Don't stop reading. Don't stop reading. I see so many people that stopped doing business, and just because you stop building business, you decided to also stop building your brain. You decided to also stop building your spirit. You decided to also stop building your emotional intelligence, and it shows. It does. Just because you stop building the business, just because you stop working towards the dream, don't forget that you are your biggest responsibility. Still grow your mind, still grow your finances, still grow the career. Yes, all of those things. But make sure you're working on things on the inside that nobody can take away from you, like your heart, your character, your mindset, your knowledge. All of those things matter. Anyways, hard conversations are a part of leadership. If you're going to lead your ship, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable getting uncomfortable, because there has to be a level of discomfort that you actually become comfortable with. Leadership requires conversations that are tough sometimes. It requires correction. It requires feedback. It requires boundaries. It requires expectations. It requires negotiation sometimes. Sometimes it requires accountability. Sometimes it requires apologies. Sometimes it requires truth. Sometimes leadership sounds like, I believe in you. Sometimes leadership just sounds like, this really isn't good enough because I believe in you. Sometimes leadership sounds like, we need to talk. Sometimes leadership sounds like, I was wrong. Sometimes leadership sounds like, I value you, but this behavior, it just can't continue. Sometimes leadership sounds like, this is not aligned with the standard that it is that we agree to. Sometimes leadership is not only encouraging people and being supportive and uplifting, sometimes it's giving people the clarity that they need to grow, because leadership requires clarity even when clarity is uncomfortable. Ephesians 4:15, speak with truth in love. Speak the truth in love, right? Both. Not just truth, not just love. Truth in love. Because when we think of truth without love, really, that can become cruelty. Love without truth becomes enabling. Some people hide behind the I'm just being honest, but honesty without kindness becomes unnecessary harshness. Because you could be, and this is what I've learned as well, man, the coach, the leader that I am today was not the same leader people experienced 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago. It's constant and never ending improvement and evolving. However, it's also understanding that I could lead with love, and my truth can just be centered in love. Because sometimes it's, oh, I love them too much just to say anything. Well, maybe the loving thing to do is tell the truth. Because if you don't tell an alcoholic or a drug addict that they have an issue and you're the person next to them, it becomes like a cancer that spreads everywhere to everyone, and everybody catching stray bullets. So y'all are going to get that on the way out, and that's okay. But there have been so many times where we've had to address something that was difficult. And man, I didn't want to do it. Man, I was avoiding the tough conversation. But immediately, it was never a bottleneck that we thought was a bottleneck in the business, in the system, in the process. No, it was a conversation that had to be had in love, in truth, that streamlined the process immediately, because everybody knew what the expectations were. Everybody knew where we all could do better. It's not, oh, this, that. No. We all could do better. It's a team effort. And sometimes it's, you just didn't want to because you were concerned about how people receive it. And I feel that because it happened to me too. And what I learned was that they were so waiting to receive the correction that they didn't even know how to start the conversation, because they knew something was up. They knew it didn't feel right. They knew that the process was not according to what the vision was. They knew that there was some type of fault in the system. But if we didn't have the conversation, it would have never been identified. So it was important, because avoiding it was making it worse. But when you chose clarity, everything shifted. So don't be afraid to have those things, because have those tough conversations. Because when you talk about being able to really not only serve somebody, but man, growing together. Hard conversations are important. Those hard conversations will completely shift what it is that you think that you're lacking, or what it is that really needs to be shifted. Number 7, confrontation doesn't have to mean conflict. And I've had to learn this the hard way. A lot of people hear the word confrontation and immediately imagine yelling, immediately imagine drama, fighting, arguing, people walking out, relationships ending. Confrontation simply means, hey, we're going to address what's happening. However, that other person has to be in a healthy state of mind. Because if you're not, this is why I said working on yourself, even though you stop working on the dream or working on the business, is non-negotiable. So if I'm having a conversation with you and I'm coming from a place of love, but you're so gun-ho on the hate, and you're so gun-ho on whatever it is that on the pain that you wish that is going to consume you and give you the power, honey, I'm going to let you keep that. Because what we're not going to do is, we're not going to be disrespectful. However, there's a difference when you're saying like, hey, can we talk about something? I want to understand your perspective. Is it okay if I actually share my perspective too? But both people have to be willing and able to do that, because also sometimes it sounds like, hey, when this happened, here's what I experienced, or here's why I feel the way that I feel, and here's what I actually need going forward. I care enough about this relationship that I don't want resentment to build. Help me understand what happened. Help me understand why you feel the way that you feel. That's confrontation. The goal of healthy confrontation is not winning. And that is something that you have to go into knowing that. Maybe it's we're going to resolve it. The goal of confrontation isn't victory, it's clarity. Maybe we resolve it, maybe we don't. Maybe we just understand each other better. Maybe we discovered that there was just a huge misunderstanding, or maybe it was because there wasn't communication or clarity early on and often. Maybe it was because your feelings got hurt. You just shut down emotionally. So you just shut down, period. Maybe we just agree to disagree. Maybe we realize that a boundary needs to change. Maybe we determine we just can't keep working together. But at least now there's clarity. And remember, confrontation doesn't destroy relationships. Sometimes avoidance does, because the resentment is growing in silence. Sometimes the stories grow in silence that we keep telling ourselves. Remember what I was telling you. So the assumptions grow in silence, and the resentment continues to grow in silence. And I could talk about so many different times of not being direct with somebody, and the moment that I was, it just created more respect. It created a better boundary in business. It created better results. It created a better level of trust with that person because we had clarity in communication. But there was just an understanding. And sometimes the conversation was uncomfortable, but the relationship was healthier moving forward. So again, confrontation doesn't destroy relationships. Sometimes avoidance does. Number 8. Sometimes what you are avoiding is just asking. So let's flip avoidance around really quick, because not everything we avoid is negative. Sometimes we're avoiding opportunity. Yeah. Because opportunity, if we're really being honest, it often requires us to ask, right? And y'all hear all the time, closed mouths don't get fed. In españoles, el que no llora no mama, right? Ask for the meeting. Sometimes this opportunity requires us to ask for the raise, ask for the introduction, ask for the referral, ask for the sponsorship, ask for the partnership, ask for the help, ask for the clarification. Sometimes it's asking for the sale. Sometimes is asking if there's room to negotiate. Just ask. And a lot of people won't ask because they're scared, they're healed, they're going to hear the word no. One of my favorite books, by the way, is Go for No. If you are in sales or any type of business building or any type of entrepreneurship that requires you to open your mouth, Go for No. Really great book, by the way. Highly recommend. However, I digress. But a lot of people, they're scared they're going to hear no. Here's the thing, you got to reframe that. No means next one. No means next opportunity. No means what is that looking like? So you cannot receive an answer to a question that you are too afraid to ask. A no might disappoint you. It's disappointed me, but I got one guarantee for you. Science guarantees that you'll never know. 1,000%. So think about how many things in your life happened because somebody asked. Somebody made the pitch, somebody made the call, somebody sent the email, somebody sent the DM, somebody introduced themselves, somebody made the call. Somebody said, would you consider X? Somebody said it. And there's so many times where I've just simply asked. And in the world of media and marketing and consulting, and if you're brand new here and you're like, well, what do you do? I help brands and entrepreneurs scale visibility, right? And I help people experience more life, whether that be locally, abroad, in their mindset, whatever that is. I love helping people. So I help people through events and retreats locally, whether it be encouragement, empowerment, enrichment in their lives, education. Sometimes it's you saying, hey, you know what? I am going to need some marketing and PR services. Sometimes I need some brand strategy. Sometimes I just need to automate my systems. Sometimes I need to identify what bottlenecks I have in the processes that I have so that I can scale my business, right? No matter where it is that I come in, whether it's media, whether it's travel, whether it's business, whether it's speaking, whether it's partnerships, 99% of these I've asked. And it's not to say that people don't come with opportunities all the time. Oh, I'm so grateful. Thank you to all of those people that actually speak my names in rooms and in conversations that I have no idea about. Such a blessing. But I'm going to tell you, a lot of ideas that will come to me in the middle of the night that I know is like a God dream or whatever, I'm asking. Every interview that now there's been people that asked me to get interviewed on the podcast and I respectfully decline because it's just not in alignment with the brand. It's not in alignment with the vision. But there are people that are very high profile people that are, you would be like, what? She got, yes, I've asked. Simply just open my mouth and ask. A lot of the partnerships, a lot of sponsorships for our events, a lot of these things. There's so many opportunity that people might look and think, wow, she's so lucky. Oh my goodness. No, she has been busting her behind. She has been grinding. Yes, favor fortunes the bold. You got to be bold in the things. And the reality is that it came because I asked. It came because I followed up. It came because I made the pitch. It came because I made the call. It came because I showed up. What would have happened? Maybe you're that person too. But what would have happened if you actually had allowed fear of no to stop the ask? I can't even fathom that. Because when I look at my nieces and my nephews and my godchildren, and I am showing them by example, like, no, whatever you put your mind to, you can do. No, you listen, God gave you gifts and your gifts are going to make room to you. How can I say that if I'm not living it? I know a lot of you just like to talk about it without actually living it. It's like, do as I say, not as I do type of deal. No, I ain't never been that girl, never gonna be that girl. But you cannot receive an answer to a question that you are afraid to ask. So just ask. Point number 9. Closure doesn't always come from the other person. Ooh. I don't know if y'all ready to go a little deep right now as we wrap this up. So sometimes avoidance keeps us emotionally stuck because we're waiting for someone else. We're waiting for them to apologize. We're waiting for them to explain. We're waiting for them to understand. We're waiting for them to take responsibility. Aw, we're waiting for them to change. That's such a good one there. We're waiting for them to finally acknowledge what they did. We're waiting for them. We're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. But what if they never do? What happens? Do they get to control you the rest of your life? Do they get to take up your most expensive piece of real estate that is your mindset? Because your mindset is where your mind sits. I always say if something is not allowing you to grow mentally, financially, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, don't let it sit there. That is the most expensive piece of real estate you will ever have. So sometimes closure, it doesn't come through a conversation. Sometimes closure is just a decision, because remember, you decide. Sometimes closure is a decision to forgive. Sometimes closure is a decision to accept reality, a decision to accept, to stop expecting, a version of someone that they have repeatedly shown you they aren't ready to become. Sometimes it's a decision to stop reopening a door that keeps injuring you. Stop opening the door. Sometimes it's saying, hey, that doesn't mean what happened was okay. It doesn't mean accountability doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you're no longer, it just, it means simply this: you're no longer requiring someone else's participation in your own rescue. You got to participate in your own rescue. And it means that because you're not waiting on someone else's participation for you to move forward. Sometimes closure isn't something they give you, sometimes it's something you give yourself permission to walk into, because you're like, yeah, that's not it. I don't even care enough to address the conversation. I don't. And you cannot require someone else's participation for your healing. Your healing is your responsibility. Your growth is your responsibility. And it's so important. It's so important that you take those times to actually realize, because as painful as it was in the moment, there have been people and there have been things and there have been business opportunities and there have been that I'm like, I didn't want to, I never got the answer that I needed. And I didn't get the answer that I necessarily wanted. And I realized, like, it's not because of me that they didn't give me the answer. It got everything to do with them. So eventually I had to say, hey, you know what? You got to move forward. You cannot let this control you any longer. You can't give this your personal power anymore. Why? Why would you? Why? Why does that have such a grip over you? Because you're expecting that person to change when they've constantly shown you over and over again who they were. You actually expect them to acknowledge something when they're incapable of putting the mirror to their own face, when they stopped working on them since George Bush Sr. was in office. Like, you got to realize sometimes that some of the battles, they just aren't worth it. And that healing is your responsibility. Your growth is your responsibility. So eventually you got to make that decision, and you got to know it's like, all right, what I got to do next, and based on the other person. It's completely based on me. Point number 10. And as we wrap this up, relief lives on the other side of resolution. Relief lives on the other side of resolution. Think about the things that you've avoided. And I had to think about this, right? And we're going to do like an avoidance audit as we wrap this up. But sometimes the things that you avoided, they take up space, mental space, emotional space, sometimes really even physical space. You wake up thinking about it. You go to sleep thinking about it. You're driving and you're thinking about it. You see the other person's name and you think about it. You see the unopened email and you think about it, because the issue has not been addressed, but you're still carrying it with you. Why? Because resolution creates room to think, room to breathe, room to make another decision, room to focus, room to move forward. How many times have you realized that? Or how many times have you finally handled something and said, man, that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. Wow. I had a whole nother version in my head of what that was going to look like. Sometimes the anticipation is worse than the conversation. And I've lived that so many times that I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Sometimes the fear was worse than the reality. Now, that doesn't mean that every conversation is going to go your way either. It may not, and that's okay. But even if the answer isn't what it is that you wanted, you moved from imagining to actually knowing. You moved from uncertainty to clarity. And clarity gives you something that avoidance cannot. It gives us the ability to make the next decision at peace. Now, let's bring it all the way back to the beginning. Sometimes the thing that is exhausting isn't what you're doing. It's what you're refusing to do. So, what are those things that you are avoiding? Let's really quick as we wrap this up. We're gonna do an avoidance audit, and this was something that I had to do this week. And if you don't have your notebook out, I'm gonna give you time to take out your notebook. And if you're driving, don't do that. Come back to this, okay? No shame, no judgment, just honesty in this, because awareness without action is still avoidance, right? So write these down. Number one, what conversation are you avoiding? What conversation am I avoiding? Here's my suggestion. Don't overthink it. What came to mind? Write it down, right? What conversation am I avoiding? Number two, what decision have I delayed? Could look something like, what have I been saying? I need to figure this out for weeks or months or years. What does that look like? Number three, what do I already know, but I don't want to admit? This one, it's going to take a little bit of courage, right? And a little bit of boldness to do that one, and it's okay. What question am I afraid to ask because I am afraid of the answer, or I'm scared of the answer? What problem am I secretly hoping will fix itself? Number six, what am I calling peace that may actually be avoidance? Remember, peace and avoidance are not the same thing. Number seven, what is this avoidance costing me? Question mark. What is it costing me emotionally? Question mark. What is it costing me spiritually? What is it costing me financially? What is it costing me relationally, mentally, spiritually? And here's honestly the big one, right? And this is the deeper question to ask. If I continue avoiding this for the next 6 months, what will it cost me? If I continue avoiding this for the next 6 months, what will it cost me? You may need to sit with that for a little bit, because remember, avoidance has interest. So now, again, let's go through these 7 questions for your avoidance audit again. Let me bring these notes up for y'all here. So number 1 was in your avoidance audit, what conversation am I avoiding? 2, what decision have I delayed? 3, what truth do I already know, but I do not want to admit? Number 4, what question am I afraid to ask? Number 5, what problem am I secretly hoping will fix itself? Number 6, what am I calling peace that may actually be avoidance? And number 7, what is the avoidance costing me emotionally, financially, relationally, professionally, mentally, spiritually? And most importantly, if I continue to avoid this for another 6 months, what will it cost me? Right? Because again, avoiding that interest. So your action step, I need you to breathe. Maybe in and out, in through your nose, out through your mouth about 4 times. Hold it at the top for 4 seconds. Then when you release, hold it again, and do that over and over again. Because I'm not asking you to fix everything today. I know some of you are like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna fix this right away. And I know my audience is not like that. We know this microwave society over here where we expect things to do overnight. We don't just talk about it, we look in it day in and day out. So I'm not asking you to fix everything today. Please do not leave this episode today with a 47-point life resolution plan. Choose one conversation, one phone call, one appointment, one decision, one question, one apology, one ask, one boundary, one truth, and ask yourself, what is the next reasonable action? Not the entire resolution or solution, right? Yes, you could have a vision for what that looks like, but just ask yourself, what is my next responsible action? The next action, maybe that's scheduling the meeting, saying something like, hey, can we talk? Maybe it's opening the bank statement. Maybe it's calling the coach. Maybe it's calling the accountant. Maybe it's having the conversation. Maybe it's booking your next personal training class. Maybe it's making the appointment. Maybe it is getting counsel, getting therapy. Maybe it's sending the pitch, sending the proposal, saying no. Maybe that's what's next. Maybe it's saying yes. Maybe it's saying, I need help. Maybe it's saying, I was wrong. Take one step. You do not need to confront everything today, but you do need to stop pretending that avoiding it means that you handle it. Remember, beautiful people, avoidance can feel safe, but safety and freedom are not always the same thing. Sometimes freedom requires discomfort. Sometimes freedom requires truth. Sometimes freedom requires hearing no. Sometimes freedom requires saying no. Sometimes freedom requires admitting I was wrong. Sometimes it's admitting I need help. Sometimes it's just saying this is not working. Sometimes it's just saying this needs to be addressed. Sometimes it's saying this relationship needs a boundary. Sometimes it's saying I need to make a decision. And if you don't remember anything else from today, remember these. Avoidance has interest. Peace and avoidance are not the same thing. Silence is still communication. Not choosing is still choosing. Truth without love becomes cruelty. Love without truth becomes enabling. Confrontation doesn't have to destroy relationships. Sometimes avoidance does. And you cannot receive an answer to a question you are too afraid to ask. Resolution creates room. And most importantly, what you refuse to confront can eventually control you. Maybe you've been praying for relief. Maybe you've been praying for peace. Maybe you've been praying for clarity. Maybe you've just been praying, God, show me what to do. And maybe you already know that next step that you're responsible for. You don't need to fix everything today. Maybe it's time to just stop avoiding that one thing. Make the call, open the email, look at the numbers, ask the questions, set the boundary, have the conversation. Tell the truth and shame the devil, okay? Ask for help. Make the decision, because sometimes the freedom you're praying for isn't waiting on another sign. Sometimes it's praying for you to address what you've already seen. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Unplugged with Pam, Breakfast Club edition, brought to you by Chosen Global. We don't just talk about it. We just talk about growth. We walk in it. And here's your challenge for the week. Do not try to fix everything. Just stop avoiding one thing. Deal with it, address it, and give yourself the opportunity to discover what's really waiting for you on the other side of it. And as always, if you have not taken advantage of our strategy call or coaching session, maybe that's for your life, for your business, for marketing, whatever it is, maybe you just need a quick chat, DM me the word coach, and I'll be more than happy to send you a complimentary booking link. Talk to you guys soon. Great day, and God bless. Much love.